What is up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So, I really wanted to talk about probably my new favorite deck in the format. That would be Naya Enchantments. I definitely toyed around with doing some Selesnya enchantments before I saw that CGB, Covert Go Blue, posted a Naya Enchantments list, and I definitely toyed around with it a little bit. And this list, the Selesnya one, it just seems to be, it does similar things, but the Naya list with the Runeforge champion just pops off. You can bring a game back. You could be losing, you're down, and the Runeforge champion Jukai Naturalist combo with the runes, you can just absolutely shred your opponent in one turn. You can go from losing all the way back to winning. And I just want to go through, break this deck down before I show you just a short 30-minute gameplay clip of me just running through silver as the rank resets. So first we have our one drop in Generous Visitor. So this is a card that honestly I thought was going to see a lot more play early on in Neon Dynasty, but it's really only surfaced in this deck, and it's not an enchantment itself. So if you cast two Generous Visitors, you don't get the, whenever you cast an enchantment, put a 1/1 counter. And if this thing were an enchantment, this would be busted. This would be in the Selesnya list, and it's obviously in the Naya list just because it's so good at what it does. So this is the only one drop, so we're running 4 of these 1/1 uncommons that are just going to buff our team whenever we're just doing what our deck naturally does. So moving on to the 2-drop spot, this is probably one of the most important slots in the deck here. So we have 4 of these really cool Michiko's Reign of Truth. So it's a 2-mana. It's a 3-step saga. And the first 2 steps of the saga are the same, so target creature gets 1/1 until end of turn for each artifact and or enchantment you control. So this thing will just bring a creature that you have 0 to 60 like it was nothing. And if you can give it trample, like we will, like I'll talk about in the next few steps, this thing will make your other creatures pop off, and then it becomes, when you exile the saga, you return it, it becomes the portrait of Michiko, and it is basically what its first 2 steps do. It's a creature that gets 1/1 for each artifact and enchantment. So moving on, we're going to have our 3 rune slots. So that's the Rune of Sustenance, the Rune of Speed, and the Rune of Might. So they're all 2 mana. One in a white, one in a red, one in a green, obviously, corresponding to what they do. So we're going to enchant a permanent. We don't have to enchant a creature, but if it's a creature, we get to do the next steps. So when the runes enter, we're going to draw a card. So all 3 of these will draw us a card. And then the green one says as long as it's a creature, it gets a 1/1 and has trample. As long as it's a creature, it gets 1/0 and has haste. And as long as it's a creature, it gets lifelink. So the white one, obviously, doesn't give a power boost, but having lifelink on your other things. So the Jukai Naturalist comes already with lifelink, but the Runeforge Champion, the Generous Visitors, and the Hallowed Haunting Spirits will not. So the white one is so perfect to give the rest of your team lifelink. You have a Jukai Naturalist, a Jukai Naturalist, a Runeforge Champion. You go and grab the white, you put it on this. Now both your creatures have lifelink, and it combos so well. The red one is, honestly, I've noticed that I just really use it to gain the haste. The 0/1 or the 1+1+0 doesn't really do much. The card draw is beautiful. The haste comes in sometimes, but mainly the Rune of Speed is just kind of there because we're in the colors. But the Rune of Might is the other one that you're going to want to get all the time, so it gives trample. So this pairs with the Michiko's Reign of Truth, the Generous Visitor. You're just buffing up your Jukai Naturalist, and then you grab the Rune of Might, you throw it on there. Now it's a 11/11 with trample and lifelink and haste, and it just pops off. So then the Jukai Naturalist, as in the Selesnya build as well, it's just the this one is the color lock of the deck, so it requires that you have green and white. So you can't if you play turn 1. If you play turn 1 Mountain, you're kind of screwed on turn 2 if you have a Jukai Naturalist. So this one is a little bit tricky in the 3 color, but as much as I've been playing the deck, it's really not that hard to hit the 2 colors that you will need to play this card. So this makes your enchantment spells cost 1 less to cast, so when we're in the late game and we're trying to hit Hallowed Haunting or the Showdown of the Scalds, it's going to make those 3 mana instead of 4, which is beautiful as we're later in the game. But the Jukai Naturalist pairs with the Runeforge Champion. So if you'll notice, the Runeforge Champion, when it enters, it's going to search our library, graveyard, for a rune card and put it into our hand. So this basically comes down. We get to go and grab one of our runes to put it into our hand, and then the Runeforge Champion also says you may pay 1 colorless mana rather than pay the mana cost for rune spells, and the runes are enchantments, and so the 1 colorless mana cost gets reduced by the Jukai Naturalist, and there will be a game coming up in what you're about to see where I had 2 runes exiled with Showdown and 2 runes in my hand. I cast Runeforge Champion, I drew another rune, and I played all of them in one turn, made my Jukai Naturalist a 10, an 11, 10 flying, vigilance, trample, lifelink. It was insane, and you're definitely going to have to stick around and watch it. But so that's how those two combo with each other. Now, I also opted to include the restoration of Ijanjo, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But this just is going to mana fix our planes a little bit. Then the second step, we just get something for free. We can discard a rune and have it come back untapped and attach it to a permanent. Not exactly super useful, but then the third one, it exiles and comes back as the Architect of Restoration, so it's got Vigilance, and then whenever it attacks or block it, you create the 1/1 colorless. The Restoration was kind of an iffy ad for me. So as you can see here, I have in the sideboard the Kami of Transience. I don't actually own any copies of these at the moment, so I decided to substitute the restoration of Ijanjo in. So, and it's actually been working out really nicely for me because I'm able to go and grab that extra planes, because the only other color pairing in the deck besides the Jukai Naturalist being a green and a white is the Hallowed Haunting, which calls for double white. So if you don't have double white, the restoration is really good at getting a second planes for you. And it's just worked out really well for me. Also, when it's discounted with Jukai Naturalist, being 2 mana, it's much more efficient than being at 3 mana. But moving on to the top end of the deck, we have the Hallowed Haunting, which I personally used for wild cards when this first came out because I thought this card was going to be busted. I thought it was going to be all over the place. I bought it when it first came out in Crimson Vow and didn't see a single deck with it. So I was really disappointed when that happened, and I basically wasted 4 mythic wild cards. And I see the Selesnya Enchantments and the Naya Enchantments pop off, and I'm like, all for it. I have 4 copies of these. This is exactly what I was wanting with Crimson Vow. So the Hallowed Haunting is so cool. As long as you control 7 or more enchantments, creatures you control are flying and vigilance, so it just busts your team. And then whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you create a white Spirit Cleric creature token that says this creature's power and toughness is equal to the number of spirits you control. So this card, I've had even just 1 out, but if you have at least 1 or 2, and you cast an enchantment, you just get 2 spirits that kind of buff each other up, and I have gone from, you get board wiped by Blood in the Snow, or the Battle of Frost and Flame, or a Doomscar, and you just get wiped out, and you're done. Cast an enchantment, get some Spirit Clerics, and then your next turn, your opponent goes, they recover. Your turn, you cast another enchantment, you get 2 more. Then you cast another one, you get 2 more, and then by that time you have a whole board again, and your opponent has to board wipe you, or else this card will just keep you in the game. And then the next card that we're going to talk about is Showdown of the Scalds. It's been so good in any deck that it's been included in. So the first step in the sagas, you're going to exile the top 4 cards of your library, and until your next turn, you may play those cards. So you can play lands, which is incredible. So if you cast this first, you get to look at the top 4. If you have lands in your hand, you exile some lands, you play those first. Then the next 2 steps are whenever you cast your next spell, or whenever you cast a spell this turn, you put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. So again, it just buffs your team. You're playing these really cheap enchantments, and it works so perfectly with the Jukai Naturalist, the Runeforge Champion. They're out together. You use the discount, you play some runes for free, you put some 1/1 counters on stuff. You have literally spent no mana, and your board is just super buff now. And then with the Hallowed Haunting out, and you're casting all these enchantments, your whole team gets flying and vigilance and lifelink and trample and haste and more lifelink, and you basically just steamroll your opponent, and it's super, super fun. I love this deck. You are probably seeing it everywhere, but I just wanted to give my take on it and just to show you some really cool gameplay. So I hope you enjoy.